I am Navel Lint. Do you know what Navel Lint is? It's that stuff, when you wear clothing, if you happen to be one of those type of people who wear clothing, your fibers, your cotton fibers and whatever fibers start to build up and they fall down the front of your chest and down your stomach and kind of build up right there in your belly button. And you can pick up a little stash of it in your belly button. You want me to show you? I'm not going to show you my navel lint. We're not that close yet. I mean, I like you, but come on. I think that's just a little too intimate. However, this I am navel lint thing comes from an idiom in this English language of ours that basically means I'm a piece of crap. I am worthless. I am nothing. And that is what my brain was screaming to me all the time. And you know what the solution was? Alcohol. This turned me into a deep, dark, totally devastated alcoholic where over an 8-year period, I went to in and out of detoxes and rehabs more times than I care to remember. Okay, I do remember it was 16 times. Yeah, pretty bad. But anyways, I was on the verge of death and everything was falling apart and I just couldn't handle it. And the voices were like, drink, your navel lint. And all of a sudden, something changed. All right. So I want to tell you what that change was and how impactful it was because I've been trying to change in every way, especially with like the 12 steps, with therapists, with cognitive behavioral therapy, with Eastern spiritualism, New Age spiritualism, just looking at squirrels, just not drinking, only drinking on Sundays, blah, 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 blah. But still this voice inside my head, you're navel lint. Drink, always one. Okay, so what happened? Let me tell you, if I can play with this system right and share my screen. Boom. Okay. This is what I started to come up with the first foundations of this. It's a summary of what I call the IC solution, the Instinctual Core solution. Before I believed all the thoughts and emotions that were going on in my head, all the fear and anxiety and all the anger and sadness that I felt. And along with all the terrible thoughts like I am navel, like judgments, like you are navel lint, and the demand, go get a drink, you are navel lint, and I know how to solve this, go get a drink. Someone cut you off, go get a drink. You're late to the dentist, go get a drink. Your girlfriend broke up with you, go get a drink. Blah, 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 blah. Drink. Okay, so that was this default perspective, and that voice was my voice because it was coming from the inside of my head. Right? So I had to listen to it. And it would get louder and louder and louder until I did. And during those 8 years, I never made it more than 6 months. But then, one day, I was spiraling down out of control, sitting over a laundry basket saying, I am navel lint. Everything's falling apart. I need a drink. And then I thought, where did all these thoughts come from? Where did all these terrible emotions come from? I don't really believe any of them. I'm a little bit more than navel lint, I thought to myself. At least 1% of me thought that. So all this stuff had grown in my subconscious and I didn't put it there. I had nothing to do with it. Yet I used to kind of think as the subconscious, it was the core of who I really was. And that's when I started to look at things in a different way. First saying that, you know what? Everything in my subconscious is full of shit. It's total lies. Over time, I studied it. I'm like, where are all these lies coming from? But I know one thing I do know is that they're not me, and I didn't put them there, and I don't want them there. So I stopped listening to them. But after long studies in lots of different disciplines and making really complex study, I'm an engineer, and I'm able to study different sciences and put them together for something to use. I made this really fantastic, wonderful, complex thing that no one would ever understand, and then I made it something that we can all understand, especially someone like me who is in such a fuzzy brain fog. When I was at my lowest point in the deepest, darkest depths of alcoholism, my brain just wasn't clicking on all cylinders. So came up with this different way of looking at what's inside of our head, where we have basically this separate entity, a separate intelligence, a separate being that's inside of our head. And I call that the instinctual core, which is a culmination of our genetically coded survival instincts that make use of the System 1 brain, the subconscious brain. The System 1 brain is it's a great term from behavioral economics that kind of says that, hey, there's this automatic brain. that's running the show 90% of the time, and whatever it's habituated to do, that's what you're going to do. Okay? But you didn't do all the programming of it. So there was a separate entity, especially in childhood, because your consciousness wasn't fully around yet. So this is a good representation, very simple representation of what's going on inside of your head. But with the IC perspective, you no longer consider yourself to be all of the thoughts and all of the emotions going on. You switch it up. You say, I'm up here. I'm my consciousness, my self-awareness. These are all kind of similar names. My sentience, my soul, let's just go with consciousness, right? It's just that thing that you know that you're the one residing in your head. And then that's along with your conscious brain, that part of the brain that you can use, that you can actually set to work. Okay? So that's you. And then there's this vast subconscious, and everything with this new perspective, everything in there is up for question. Okay, whether you put it there, whether it was somehow ingrained in there, or very likely, was it put there by this character down here, the instinctual core, the culmination of all your survival instincts, but that use your system 1 brain, your subconscious brain, pretty much completely outside of your awareness. But now, why would you want to separate from this thing that is your survival instincts, right? They're your survival instincts. Well, you know why. Because it's made for a world of 30,000 years ago. It's made from a time when your tribe was 100 people and there were threats to your life all over the place every single day, where you had to be on high alert. It has not changed barely an ounce in these 30,000 years, and it's still trying to protect you from all these threats. And now that the world has changed from your tribe of 100 and maybe a few rival tribes and a few saber-toothed tigers and things, it's changed to so many tribes and tribes everywhere, and this global tribe of 8 billion people. And it's trying to figure out its place because it wants to get to the top of the tribe of 100 people. It still thinks it's 100 people, but now it's a tribe of 8 billion people. And it basically always makes you feel like shit because you can never compare to who you're constantly seeing on TV, on the media, on social media, and everyone posting their fake pictures and the celebrities and the anomalies and the goats. And it just says, you can't compete. You're not the best looking. You're not the smartest. You're not the tallest. You're not the most handsome. You're not the funniest. You're nothing. When the IC is comparing you to the world around you. And so that's what kind of took over me eventually, and it always had one way out. So let me show you how this was working. When I've created this tool called the User's Guide. That's it right there. This is a breakdown, and I'm going to show you how this works. Basically, you can break down any single emotion that you didn't put it there, any sadness, depression, anxiety, fear that you didn't put there, that you don't want there. You can break down a lot of the demands and judgments that are going down inside your head and see that they're separate with this IC User's Guide. Okay, so I'm going to jump over to that with this different view here and show you what was going on with me. Okay, so in the beginning, I always had this sense of anxiety. I guess I've always been an alcoholic, since the day I was born, because there was always this sense of fear and discomfort and these kind of judgments. You're not good enough. Demands saying, get out of here, run, flight. I'm sorry. Get out of here. Avoid the threat. The instinctual core only wants 3 things to go down. It wants you to destroy the threat, avoid the threat, or attain the treat. For me, it was a heightened sense of fight or flight and more leaning towards the flight side. It was always because I would say, the reason I say I was an alcoholic since the day I was born is because my first memories are of kindergarten, where I was holding on to my mom with my life. When the kindergarten teacher, poor Mrs. Ferguson, was pulling me and saying, yeah, come on, man. You got to come in and sit with these kids. I'm like, no, I don't know. These kids are going to kill me. And of course, it wasn't even me. My consciousness hadn't even fully formed on the scene. There was something else running the show, and that was this instinctual core. So this is kind of all of the activation filter. What's going on in the outside world that sets either the instinctual core off or sets off the us, right? And so this is the internal reaction, and this is the external reaction. So an external reaction, the internal reaction would be something like first day of kindergarten, and it says immediately, it's hitting on both the pecking order and the belonging, but basically, to simplify it, I'll just work with the pecking order. Now, it slowly devolved into all these layers. But in the beginning, the instinctual core always said, you're a loser, you're at the bottom of the pecking order. Do not act up, do not say anything around other people, avoid other people at all costs. Well, until, of course, that magical day when I was about 15, when my buddy's older brother said, here, drink this shot of Jack Daniels. And a couple shots later, I was like, holy shit. I was freed from the instinctual core. I had found the solution. Alcohol wasn't the problem, it was the solution. It made me stop having that terrible feeling at all times. I was no longer Navel Lint for the first time. Okay, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So what was going on was the instinctual core on the pecking order layer saying, I'm a piece of shit, so don't act, don't get out of line, don't try and move to the top of your tribe, don't speak to people that are higher than you, better than you, taller than you, older than you, which is basically everyone. At least that's the position I was placed in. So everything I just wanted to, the instinctual core was trying to get me to run from. So I was completely hijacked. Now, the only way, and I never figured out, like life, although I learned how to put on this cool guy face and pretended to be comfortable and pretended to get along and pretended like everything was okay, I felt a total sheer dread and panic inside at all times until I found the pleasure coming in the form of a bottle. I remember the first time I had those shots like it was yesterday. It was like, oh my gosh, all of this is gone. Boom. And I no longer had to avoid the threat. In fact, I had attained the treat. I had attained the solution. And the instinctual core instantly locked on and said, you did it. You've made it to the top of the pecking order. Because and to me, I didn't know this internal simple psychology was going on. I just felt great because all of a sudden all the weight was taken off my head, off my shoulders, and all the people around me were no longer my rivals or my tribal people that I had to try and step up the pecking order layer. Oh, do this and make them seem like I'm a little cooler. No, everything changed. Everyone was my friend. And I laughed and giggled and talked with anyone, talked to the older guys. By the way, I ended up having 8 more shots that night for the first time I ever drank and threw up all the next day. But still, I knew I had found my new best friend. So that's when the instinctual core started ingraining it in right from the first time. And then eventually, since it's an addictive substance, it kind of slowly devolved down into a point where, since I'm going on kind of a little long here, let me just get right down to the point where it went all the way down. It hit on the belonging layer, the safety layer, the IC evaluation layer, the manageability layer, but eventually it came under the physiological layer. And that was when it became more important, when alcohol became more important than food. It became more important than water. And it became as important as breathing. There were times when I'd wake up and look for that bottle and just say, oh, thank God. I'd reach that bottle, I'd find it. Oh, I still have a bottle. But then I'd look at it and it'd be empty. I'm like, oh, crushing. And then my instinctual core would immediately get me to work, get my conscious brain to work on how to find liquor. It was freaking crazy, man. And then all of a sudden, but I realized I could be separate from this. I'm no longer, that voice almost, for me, it happened so quickly when I just said, I'm no longer listening to all the lies in my head, even before I'd figured out the whole instinctual core thing. I was like, holy shit, all these things in my subconscious are total lies. And I was able to catch them. And it started like right away. Like at that point, it was February 25th, 2017, when I had my last drink. It was March 14th, 2017, when I had this revelation, like everything in my head's a lie. And I stopped going to any AA meetings. I stopped going to therapy. And I just remembered all the time, it's a lie. And the voice got quieter and quieter and quieter. And it was within a few weeks that the voice didn't have a shot. Still to this day, about 9 years later, there's an occasional voice that says, hey, we could probably have a drink. And I still like, yeah, not a chance. Because there was a good chance if I had a drink right now, I'd be in a hospital in 2 weeks and then move on to a detox. That's how bad it got at the end, because I would just be nonstop vodka. So, point of the story is I was Navel Lint. And then I figured out it was all a lie. Let me show you what kind of happens when you go through the pass-through event. You learn to let the fear and the anger, the anger and the hate and the sadness that are all lies, the cravings, the stress, and the demands and the judgments, they're all lies. You learn to let them pass right through. Yeah, I know, it sounds awesome, right? Boom. And you just see them and say, I see you. And when you treat that thing inside of you like it's a little puppy, like you're training a little puppy, or like a kid learning, you're coaching a kid in how to play baseball, whatever it is. But you just start to look at the inside of your brain as you got a co-pilot in there, and that co-pilot doesn't know what he's doing, but he thinks he does. But you can learn how to retrain him. Sometimes it happens quickly, sometimes it's slowly, but the separation alone, experimenting with that separation alone, can be so freaking effective. You no longer feel that sense of guilt that I'm this alcoholic, I am the piece of shit. You realize that there's something else in you that's doing this to you. Something that doesn't fit in this world, something that was made for a world of 30,000 years ago that doesn't understand the world today. So I think that about wraps it up. I probably went on a little long, but I want you to know, please like and subscribe and do that stuff. But if you want to try this out for yourself, for whatever you're suffering from, we do for all sorts of things. You see the flexibility of this user's guide, and we have this process called Radar where you can learn to deactivate whatever it is, or retrain the instinctual core on whatever you're working on. And then you can learn how to reactivate yourself, where you start living in these realms. And let me show you what that looks like real quick. Yeah, where you start living in these realms of intrigue, appreciation, engagement, and self-improvement. Okay, so when you start to live up here instead, it's a whole different world. You no longer are thinking about immediate gratification to get rid of the terrible feelings. You're starting to look at the world where you're just happy all the time and you want to explore. But I'm getting way beyond myself. The point is, come visit us. If you want to get involved, come visit us at the instinctcenter.com. Instinctcenter.com. It's in all the notes. And that's about it. So I'm out. Adios. Peace in the Middle East. We'll see you later. Thanks for listening. Hope to see you soon.